Discussion today about Russian disinformation and propaganda, and I often think when I hear our discussion that if we'd only listen to our allies in Central Europe, Eastern Europe, we would be a little ahead of the game because they've been warning us for a long time about what's happening to them. I'm looking at Disinformation Review this week, and here's the top of many stories that they are exposing. A Czech Republic disinformation outlet wrote that the Council of Europe is enforcing a rule that Czech children are stolen from their mothers in order to privilege the LGBT community and help the Islamization of the nation, thus playing into two very common anti-Western narratives in one, and obviously very false narratives, you will tell us this morning, correct? So, I mean, this is happening constantly among your member states, like the Czech Republic, but also in Western Europe. We are now seeing this happening in France and in Germany with the elections. We certainly are experiencing it here. I think the chairman is right. People are aware that there was meddling. I think they're not aware the extent to which it happens all the time, and not just here in this country, but in other democracies, many of which are fledgling democracies. And it is this combination of cyber attacks, hacking, troll farms on social media. What we just read here is an example of some of the disinformation. Think tanks that are useful to them, political organizations, state-sponsored media, including here in this country. We have recently authored legislation here which passed at the end of last year, and Senator Murphy's here this morning. We authored this to try to get the United States more aggressive in responding by coordinating better and having more effective messaging. It's called the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act. It set up a global engagement center at the State Department. And my question to you today is to dig a little deeper into what you've already talked about. You mentioned the EU External Action Services Stratcom Task Force, and it seems to me they're doing very important work. The question is, very specifically, how could we coordinate better with your own new organization, Stratcom, to better provide information back and forth about disinformation and how to counter it? And I hope you're taking that from this hearing, that you'll be reporting back and saying we would like to encourage that and increase that. Our State Department effort is just standing up. But that would be my first question, I guess, is what else are you providing to your member states? Now, I know you also have under Europol, as Chairman Corker referenced, the EU Intelligence and Situation Center, other data collection efforts, which offer real opportunity for sharing information and mutual support. Is that also going on between you and your member states?
Yes, Senator, and we also have the counter-cyber center in Europol as well. So, I mean, there are a wide range of efforts being undertaken to combat these different threats that you mentioned, which are, as you rightly say, something of enormous concern on both sides of the Atlantic.
Can Stratcom actually tap into those resources, those intelligence resources?
I would not like to say for certain they can in that way. We certainly work very closely across all the institutions in Europol and the External Action Service and the Commission. So I think there is a very strong degree of coordination at European level.
My sense is that here in this country, and my sense is this is true in the EU as well, that there is not the kind of coordination that would be useful always with regard to countering the disinformation. And so I know sometimes there are legal barriers to it. Sometimes there are different levels of classification that make it difficult. But I think this is, again, something that's in our interest and your interest, both to coordinate across the Atlantic, but also to have better coordination between our intelligence services and the efforts we're making to try to counter. You've got 22 member states in NATO, as you said earlier, and you know they've come up with this new approach to combat what they call hybrid threats.
Yes.
So kinetic and non-kinetic, and certainly disinformation is a big part of that. This joint framework on countering hybrid threats has now been established. Can you talk a little about that? Again, can we collaborate better? Obviously, the EU, the United States are the major players here. And is there information sharing between NATO and these specific organizations like Stratcom?
Well, I Firstly, of course, the hybrid center of excellence that you mentioned is being set up in Finland as a NATO exercise. And yes, there is a very good exchange of information and best practice across the different players. This is not to say that one cannot always do better. As I think Senator Shaheen pointed out, it's not just a question of the disinformation is not just about intelligence, it's also about dealing with things which are not secret, but which are actually sort of very public, and how you deal with that, and how you respond to it, how you make it better known that this is misinformation and disinformation. But we would be certainly happy to discuss further how we could work even more closely together on those issues.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think the example I used at the outset is one along those lines. It's not a matter of intelligence sharing on that. It's a matter of ensuring people know that these are false narratives and communicating clearly, and we certainly have a shared interest in that. So we thank you for your personal commitment to that cooperation between the United States and the EU, and look forward to working with you more closely on this.
Thank you, sir.